Hello and welcome to the program. I am Suren. As it has been mentioned before in Eastern belief systems, in Hinduism, happiness is often understood as a state of well-being achieved through a combination of spiritual practice, detachment from suffering, and understanding of the interconnectedness of all things. This happiness is not simply about experiencing pleasure, but rather about cultivating a sense of peace, equanimity, and liberation from the cycle of suffering. Buddhism. Nirvana. The ultimate goal in Buddhism is nirvana, a state of enlightenment characterized by the absence of suffering, attachment, and a cycle of rebirth. Herein we also discover the Four Noble Truths. These truths form the foundation of Buddhist teachings, stating that suffering exists. It has a cause, attachment and craving. It can be overcome, and there is a path to overcome it. The Noble Eightfold Path. Mindfulness and meditation. Now, practices like mindfulness and meditation are crucial for cultivating equanimity and detachment, leading to inner peace. Karma and rebirth. Buddhists believe that actions have consequences. Karma and individuals are reborn based on their accumulated actions, their deeds, highlighting the importance of ethical behavior. And Hinduism? Moksha. Similar to nirvana in Buddhism, moksha is the liberation from the cycle of rebirth and suffering, often described as a union with Brahman, the ultimate reality. Dharma. In Hinduism, dharma refers to one's duty and indeed righteous way of living, which contributes to happiness and spiritual growth. And rebirth? Hinduism also emphasizes karma and rebirth, with good deeds, leading to positive consequences and better rebirths. Spiritual liberation. Hinduism offers various paths to spiritual liberation, including devotion, knowledge, and yoga, all of which can lead to a state of bliss and happiness. What are the common threads? Interconnectedness. Okay, both Buddhism and Hinduism emphasize the interconnectedness of all beings and the importance of cultivating compassion and understanding for others. Detachment. Both traditions encourage detachment from worldly attachments and desires as a means of finding inner peace and true happiness. Spiritual growth. Both emphasize the importance of spiritual practice and self-discovery as pathways to realizing true happiness. In essence, both Buddhism and Hinduism offer a philosophy of happiness, the transcendence, material pleasure, and focuses on cultivating inner peace, understanding, and liberation from suffering. Buddhism and Hinduism, according to encyclopedic knowledge, well, it is explained that both Hinduism and Buddhism redirect our attention here in both ways, have common origins in the culture of ancient India, which later spread and became dominant religions in Southeast Asian countries, including Cambodia and Indonesia around the 4th century CE. Realism arose in the Gangetic plains of eastern India in the 5th century BCE during the second urbanization, 600 to 200 BCE. We discover that Hinduism developed as a fusion and synthesis of practices and ideas from the ancient Vedic religion and other elements and from other local Indian traditions. Both religions share many beliefs and practices, but also exhibit pronounced differences that have led to significant debates. Both religions share a belief in karma and rebirth, or reincarnation. They both accept the idea of spiritual liberation, or moksha, or nirvana from the cycle of reincarnation, and promoting similar religious practices, such as dhyana, samadhi, mantra, and devotion. Both religions also share many deities, though their nature is understood differently, including Sarasvati, Vishnu, Upulvan, Mahakala, Indra, Ganesha, and Brahma. However, Buddhism notably rejects fundamental Hindu doctrine, such as Atman, substantial self or soul, Brahman, a universal eternal source of everything, and the existence of a creator God, Ishvara. Buddhism teaches not self, anatman, and dependent arising as fundamental with their metaphysical theories. Now the origins of Buddhism. Historically, the roots of Buddhism lie in the religious thought of Iron Age within India around the middle of the first millennium BCE. This was a period of great intellectual ferment and socio-cultural change known as the Second Urbanization, marked by the growth of towns and trade. The composition of the Upanishads and the historical emergence of the Shramana traditions. New ideas developed both in the Vedic tradition in the form of the Upanishads and outside the Vedic tradition through the Shramana movements. The term Shramana refers to several Indian religious movements parallel to but separate from the historical Vedic religion, including Buddhism, Jainism, and others such as Ajivika. Several Shramana movements are known to have existed in India before the 6th century BCE, pre-Buddha, pre-Mahavira, and these influenced both the Astika and Nastika traditions of Indian philosophy. According to Martin Wilshire, the traditions evolved in India over two phases, namely Pakakapuda and Savaka phases, the former being the tradition of individual ascetic and the latter being of disciples, and that Buddhism and Jainism ultimately emerged from these Brahmanical and non-Brahmanical ascetic groups shared and used several but similar ideas. But Shramana traditions also drew upon already established Brahmanical concepts and philosophical roots, states Wilshire, to formulate their own doctrines. In the Brahmanical tradition, internal IZ and variously reinterpreted the three Vedic sacrificial fires as concepts such as truth, rights, tranquility, and restraint. Buddhist texts also refer to the three Vedic sacrificial fires, reinterpreting and explaining them as ethical conduct. The Shramana religions challenged and broke with Brahmanical tradition on core assumptions such as Arman, soul, self, Brahman, the nature of afterlife, and they rejected the authority of the Vedas and Upanishads. Buddhism was one among several Indian religions that did so. Hinduism. Again, the scholars regarding Hinduism as a fusion or synthesis of various Indian cultures and traditions. Among its roots are the historical Vedic religion, itself already the product of a composite of the Aryan and Harappan cultures and civilizations, which evolved into the Brahmanical religion and ideology of Kuru kingdom and Iron Age in northern India, but also the Shramana or Renansa traditions of northern India, and such as the religions of the Indus Valley civilization, Dravidian traditions, for instance, and also the local and tribal religions. This Hindu synthesis emerged after the Vedic period, between 500 to 200 BCE and circa 300 CE, in or after the period of second urbanization, and during the early classical period of Hinduism, when the epics of the first Puranas were composed. This Brahmanical fold via the Smriti literature. This synthesis emerged under the pressure of the success of Buddhism and Jainism. During the Gupta reign, the first Puranas, which were written and used to disseminate the mainstream religious ideology amongst pre-literate and tribal groups undergoing acculturation, the resulting Puranic Hinduism was markedly did from the earlier Brahmanism of the Dharma Sutras in the Smritis. Hinduism coexisted for several centuries with Buddhism to finally gain the upper hand at all levels in the 8th century. Terms and teachings. Okay, Buddhism and Hinduism share numerous terms and concepts such as dharma, karma, samadhi, samsara, dhyana, jnana, klesha, nirodha, samkara, brahmin, brahmakarya, and nirvana. The Buddha uses numerous religious terms which are also used in Hinduism, though they often use them indifferently and in very novel ways. Many terms which Buddhism shares with Hinduism carry a different meaning in the Buddhist tradition. For example, in the Samana Phala Sutra, the Buddha is depicted presenting a notion of the three knowledges, or Tevija, a term also used in the Vedic tradition to describe knowledge of the Vedas as being not texts, but things that he had experienced. The true three knowledge is said to be constituted by the process of achieving enlightenment, which is what the Buddha is said to have achieved in the 3 watches of the night of his enlightenment. Karma, rebirth, and samsara. Karma is a central part of Hindu and Buddhist teachings. Karma is a word meaning action or activity and often implies its subsequent results, also called karma phala, or the fruits of action. Karma theory is commonly applied to the ethical realm of cause and effect in both Buddhism and Hinduism. In Buddhism and in Hinduism, a person's words, thoughts, and actions for the basis were good and or bad karma. Good deeds, good karma, lead to good karmic results. In Sanskrit, it is karma phala, the fruits of karma, which can include the circumstances of one's future reincarnation. Likewise, even actions might result in negative karmic consequences. Thus, the Indian idea of karma is also closely associated with the idea of reincarnation or rebirth. One's karmas in previous lives affect one's present existence, and one's actions in this life will lead to the effects in the next life. Both Buddhism and Hinduism accept that living beings are constantly cycling through different bodies and realms of existence in a repetitive process called samsara, literally the wandering. Dharma in Sanskrit, Devanagari, or in Pali, Dhamma, is an Indic term common to all Indian religions. Dharma can mean nature, natural law, reality, teaching, religion, or duty, and with respect to its significance for spirituality and religion might be considered the way of the higher truth. A Hindu appellation for Hinduism itself is Sanatana Dharma, which translates as the eternal Dharma. Similarly, Buddha Dharma is a common way that Buddhists refer to Buddhism. In Hinduism, Dharma can refer to religious duty or universal order, right conduct, or simply virtue. In Buddhism, Dharma can mean the true nature of things or natural law that the Buddha discovered. It can also refer to the teachings of the Buddha, which explain and to reveal this nature. Both Buddhism and some forms of Hinduism emphasize the importance of monasticism or monasticism. In Buddhism, monastic sangha plays a central role in teaching and passing down the Buddha's Dharma. Monasticism is also seen as an ideal way of life for cultivating the qualities that lead to awakening. In certain sects of Hinduism, the life of the renounced or sannyasa is also very important. Cosmology and deities. Well, Buddhist and Hindu cosmology share many similarities. Both cosmologies are cyclical and both accept that the universe goes through constant cycles of growth and destruction. Both traditions also accept that there are many different realms or worlds or lokas other than human realm. These include various hell realms and celestial deva realms. Buddhism and Hinduism share some of the same deities, including Saraswati, known as Benzaiten in Japan, Vishnu, known as Upulvan in Sri Lanka, Shiva, known as Maheshwara in Buddhism, Mahalaya, a form of Shiva in Hinduism, is seen as a form of Avalokiteshvara in Mahayana Buddhism. In Indra, Vedic, and Hindu storm god of the heavens, who is also widely the picture of Buddhist scriptures Ganesh, more widely known as Ganapati in Buddhism. Brahma, a key in the old Upanishads, who is also seen as a protective figure in Buddhism called Mahaprama, and also as a class of deities, Lakshmi in Japanese. Buddhism, she is known as Kishijoten, Tara is an important state in Tibetan Buddhism. In Hinduism, Tara Devi is one of the 10 Mahavidyas. There you have it. The Buddhist text Mahamayuri Tantra, written during the 1 to 3rd century CE, mentions various deities such as Maheshvara through South Asia and invokes them for the protection of the Buddha Dharma. It also mentions a large number of Vedic rishis. Liberation. Both Buddhism and Hinduism teach a similar goal of liberation and spiritual enlightenment from the cycle of rebirths or samsara. Both religions accept that the escape from the cycle of rebirth or samsara is the highest goal of the spiritual life. In both religions, this liberation is considered the complete end of rebirth and reincarnation. In Hinduism, this liberation may be called moksha or nirvana or kaivalya, and in Buddhism it may be called vimoksha. In Pali, vimokha, nirvana, Pali, nibbana, or body awakening. Both Hinduism and Buddhism use the term nirvana or nibbana in Pali for spiritual liberation, which literally means blowing out or quenching. The term is free Buddhist, but its etymology is not essentially conclusive for finding out its exact meaning as the highest goal of early Buddhism. Both religions also generate deliberate beings who have attained the goal of spiritual liberation. What is called liberated beings, either arhats or Buddhas, or awakened ones. In Hinduism, liberated beings are commonly called jivan muktas, though the term nirvana is also used. The term Buddha is used in some Hindu scriptures. In the Vayu Purana, for example, the sage Daksha calls Shiva a Buddha. Practices. Ethics. Let's talk about that. Both Hinduism and Buddhism promote similar ethical systems. The virtue of non-harming, or ahimsa, is a key virtue in both Hindu ethics and Buddhist ethics. Other importantly shared ethical principles include non-attachment, or vairagya, renunciation, or nekhamma, and truthfulness, or satya. Yogi practice, or dhyana and samadhi, well, the practice of yoga is intimately connected to the religious beliefs and practices of both Hinduism and Buddhism. There is a range of common terminology and common descriptions of the meditative states that are seen as the foundation of meditation practice in both Hindu, yoga, and Buddhism. Scholars have noted that the concepts of dhyana and samadhi, technical terms describing stages of meditative absorption, are common to meditative practices in both Hinduism and Buddhism. Most notable in this context is the relationship between the systems of 4 Buddhist dhyana states. In Pali, we call it jhana, and the samprajnana or samprajnata samadhi state of classical yoga. Also, many Tibetan Vajrayana practices of the generational stage and completion stage work with the chakras, inner energy channels or nadis, and kundalini, called tummo in Tibetan. Yoga scholar Stephen Cope argues that Buddhism and Hindu traditions like Patanjali's yoga, which is a system which is very influential on modern Hinduism, are strikingly similar and on numerous key ways, having shared a long period of interchange up from or about to 500 CE. It was a while ago when someone asked what kind of people are the happiest, and someone else answered, saying, Buddhists among them all are the happiest religions. We discovered that social studies have found Buddhists are being the happiest religious people among many others, especially along with evangelical Christians and Catholics. Interestingly also, Muslims and Orthodox Christians normally scored much lower for happiness, around the same or lower than atheists, according to statistics. Some people found a UK study from 2022 on different happiness levels, and it's worth looking into. One of those next times we can do that. If we would consider the exploration of determinants of happiness and life satisfaction, we may need to look into the study with the different religious experiences which differ on levels of happiness and life satisfaction. And this may be affected by countries' economic and cultural environment. Within some, the stories we have found that individual religious and countries' level of development play significant role in shaping people's subjective well-being. What is being discovered shows that Protestants, Buddhists, and Roman Catholics were happier and more satisfied with their lives in comparison to other religious groups. Maximizing people's happiness and life satisfaction has been the preferred indicator of social progress, and many researchers have came up with ideas on influencing subjective well-being. However, the association between religion and suggested well-being has appeared in a fragmented literature, with methodical and conceptual difficulties. Many such studies are limited to just looking at this issue in relation to Christianity and only looking at one country. The aim of the study needs to be to explore whether different religions and their experiences differ in levels of happiness and life satisfaction, and whether it is affected by the countries being considered. Contextual are factors as cultural and economic environment develops further. One needs to look at a large number of different religious groups and across a wide range of countries using some data from a worldwide surveys. It is found that the function of happiness and life satisfaction, where happiness is the most closely associated with emotions, feelings, and moods, and life satisfaction is concerned with people's cognitive evaluations and judgments about their life, which may include evaluations of their work or personal relationships. In fact, a positive association between spirituality and people's happiness has been reported in empirical research. Most of such findings tend to suggest that a religion or spirituality is of some benefit in terms of people's sense of personal well-being when it comes to expressing their emotions, gratitude, caring, and charitable deeds, coping with adversity and social connections. In 2009, Kim Prieto made mention of religion as a source of variation in the experience of positive and negative emotions across many countries, and a study conducted amongst students from about 49 nations studying in the US reported an association between religion and experience of emotions. McCullough made mention of religion being associated with positive effect and well-being and encouraging the experience of certain emotions and other emotions. Protestants, evangelical Christians seek to experience positive emotions at a high intensity compared to Christian Catholics. However, he also emphasized with their contemplative traditions that Buddhists may be encouraged to seek out emotions which are of low stimulation in their presence. Despite a large number of studies reporting a positive association between religion and well-being, questions have been raised about the representativeness of these findings because previous studies have been restricted to only a few religious groups and within country analysis disregarding relative or relevant context influences. Several authors have called for one cross-national study of the link between religion and well-being and inclusion into the analysis of national and social context. Utilizing a large number of religious groups and across a large range of countries worldwide, the study explored with a different religious experience and different levels of happiness and life satisfaction, and whether this is affected by countries' specific contextual factors such as cultural and economic development. Any replicated findings across countries using participants from a range of religious groups such as Buddhists, Hindus, Jews, Muslims, Christians, other religions, and non-religious groups. The study investigated the role of variation in some religious groups such as the Christian Roman Catholics, Protestants, Orthodox, because these groups have different traditions and may have different intensity of emotions. This investigated also the cognitive component of life satisfaction in order to get a big picture of well-being across religions. The list created of these religious groups selected in the study was drawn, and religious comprised of Christians, particularly Muslims, and Hindus, Buddhists, Jews, even atheists, agnostic, and people responding to no religious affiliation. It certainly is not definable easily. Each religious grouping in the study was not intended to be criticized. The Buddhists supported always to a subscription to the middle way and accordance with what is outlined by Buddha in order to eventually achieve enlightenment and Buddhahood as the goal. For Hindus, adherence to the concept of Hinduism is required in order for the devotee to achieve the all-important moksha and release from samsara cycle. Since I cannot support any discrimination against any belief systems, I will remain extremely neutral in my following comments, as I have been doing so all along, and some of which are based upon a number of friends and students' personal research. Many of them are either involved in psychiatric study or practicing a variety of beliefs. I will attempt to present some of them in full appreciation as they are spoken to me. Speaking of happiness, in Eastern philosophy, it is a byproduct and an emotional response, even perhaps a chemical event in the brain, as it may be. Perhaps contentment is closer to a goal for both Buddhists and Hindus, because when one breaks oneself of the illusions of life, one releases one's human spirit and attains the enlightenment necessary to see the world for its beauty. After all, the aim of life is liberation, or simply moksha. The Buddhists call it nirvana, as you know. Nirvana or moksha is liberation from the illusion of human life, the cycle of birth and death. One can attain moksha by self-actualization and realizing that one is not this physical body. As humans, we all have duties, needs, but we are not our duties and our needs. We are basically a soul, a thought. According to the student and the teachers, by letting go of desires, one releases oneself from its hold and one becomes more rational. Hindus believe and accept by letting go of desires, looking outward and becoming more rational, more open to the universe. Buddhists, on the other hand, speak of much suffering. As we know, the Buddha attained nirvana by realizing that suffering was inevitable, and it was unnecessary and truly unimportant. However, by releasing oneself from those responses of emotions to suffering, as he did, one breaks the hold and the toll it takes on one's inner strength. If one breaks the illusion of suffering and desires, one takes control and becomes a part of the cosmic Brahman, the universal consciousness. Therefore, happiness in the Eastern philosophy is about transcendence. There you have it. With that, I will see you again by the next episode. Until then, smile and be happy. Thank you.